Welcome to Season 2 of The Shift, Stories of Resistance and Resilience, a multi-platform conversation series produced and hosted by me, Mark Charles Rivera, the professional storyteller. I believe that stories have the power to change the world. Through honest conversations and powerful storytelling, we explore how people challenge systems, shift narratives, and transform culture, creating a more inclusive, just, and liberated world in our lives and in our work. Here on this podcast, you'll hear from changemakers, truth tellers, and community builders who are using their voices and their stories to move us forward. So if you believe in the power of storytelling to spark change, you're in the right place. Listen closely, take notes, recognize our shared humanity. This is The Shift. Hey y'all, welcome back to The Shift. Season 2 has been hot, like hot off the press conversations with some of the best authors, storytellers, speakers, and leaders across sectors. And today's guest is just part of that large, awesome crowd of people I've admired for many years. This is our first time having a face-to-face conversation, so I'm a little low-key nervous. But she is someone, if you are in the world of higher education, in particular higher education and communications and marketing as it relates to student development, then you know this person. She is the blueprint. She is someone that you aspire to be as well in the craft as she is. Today's guest is the one and only Dr. Josie Ahlquist, who guides leaders and organizations and students to practice purposeful digital leadership through speaking, coaching, and consulting. Dr. Josie's work is grounded in grant-funded, award-winning research that has enabled her to train thousands around the globe as a speaker, providing consulting services to institutions and companies, and coach professionals in branding, voice, and positioning. In 2023, she was named and selected as a National Pillar of the Profession, one of the highest honors for student affairs. Again, she is the gold star standard for me. She is a 3-time LinkedIn Top Voice Education and has for 6 years been recognized by EdTech magazine as one of the top 50 must-read higher education technology blogs. And her podcast, Josie and the podcast, has been featured by the Chronicle of Higher Education and Inside Higher Ed. Her book, Digital Leadership in Higher Education, Purposeful Social Media in a Connected World, was listed as an Amazon #1 new release for college and university student life. And she is my guest today on the podcast. I'm still shitting myself that she said yes. Dr. Josie, hello!
To be here.
So we were talking about before we started recording how we couldn't recall whether we ever met in real life. And, the higher ed world is not too big, especially when you get into like the subfield of it. But I don't think I've ever met you face to face. But I've been following your work for so long that I feel like I know you in my head. And then of course we have Danielle in common as a mutual friend and colleague. And I'm just so honored to know you and to exist in your orbit. So thank you so much for saying yes.
Well, thank you for creating this space for people to tell their stories, to hold space, whether if it is in celebration or in challenge. I know as a podcaster how much work this takes. Just to like press record is that only half of it. And so I know the heart it takes behind the hard work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, sometimes my team and I have to have these hard conversations around like, what's the ROI and is it worth the amount of time you're spending on it? And I'm like, shut up, it's worth it. And they're like, okay, but what is? And I'm like, it will get there. So yeah,
listen, I'm a researcher by like indoctrination and getting my doctorate. But there's also ROR, which is return on relationships.
Yes.
And you and I knowing each other through someone else.
Yeah.
That's where like, and the ROI comes from the relationships.
Right.
The podcast is actually a very intimate platform.
It is.
In your ears, in your eyes. And sometimes the numbers take a little longer to have a connection, but the connections definitely.
And that's essentially what I wasn't as eloquent about it as you just put it, but I said to my team, it's about the relationships I'm building, it's about the connections I'm forming, and it's about at the end of the day, I don't see the podcast as a vehicle for new business, but 97% of my business comes from relationships. It comes from word of mouth. So if the podcast is cultivating, deepening relationships, then it might lead to more business. But the
Yeah.
purpose of this isn't a direct line to business. It is about building relationships because I happen to exist as a young firm and succeeding on a backdrop of a very difficult time in our country. And so that's because it was built over a course. Even you having you as a guest, I was like, I never would have thought in a million years that I could have you as a podcast guest. Like that just to my mind is like, you're like, you're Dr. Josie in my head. So I'm like, I don't even think I could even ask you. And then, me and Danielle reconnected recently
Oh
because,
no.
and so I just appreciate
I'm
that.
just a girl, and what I find is even the most executive people I work with,
Yeah.
they're just people.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Very
I'm going to stop going in a second, but yeah,
oh
you
no.
are. Yeah, you are. I mean, and I to give you some context. So I was a young professional when I met Danielle, who's our mutual friend and colleague, and I remember reading articles that you wrote and thinking about how I can hone my craft as a student affairs professional in the communication and marketing space. And so you were extremely influential in how I approached that work and the standard I held myself to, especially at a time when social media still was relatively newer to the field. And a lot of student affairs divisions weren't necessarily creating departments for it either, right? Like me and Danielle were one of the few departments in the CUNY system dedicated just to student affairs communications. And so it was a very special time in my life. And it was also my first full role after graduating college. And so you became this like blueprint for me and like how to do it well and how to do it in a way that felt value aligned. Yeah. So thank you.
Means a lot. Now that I'm not at a campus, you don't have the students reaching out to be like, "Oh, Josie, you were
Yeah.
right. Like, look at me now." I mean, they still do
Yeah.
here and there, but yeah, who you want to impact shifts a little
Yeah.
bit. And so that's
And
really
like
special.
I've been expat from higher ed now for quite a bit of time, and I never plan on going back directly. But it was still very, very, I mean, influential, and so I'm so thankful
Yeah.
for your work. But who are
Thank
you
you.
outside of those professional highlights I keep talking about? Who are you outside of the
Who
work?
am I? Oh my gosh. Well, like, let's get the tissue box and like let's just get right into it. Well, um
We only have limited time.
no. Well, I'm an aunt to four. I am absolutely in love with them, but I also am very far away from my family. I grew up in a very, very small town in Wyoming. Knew that wasn't going to be where my roots forever would be. So I travel a lot. I'm either in Los Angeles or United Airlines. Um, I am training for a triathlon. I did 4 before the pandemic, and then life just life, and I just turned 45. And I'm like, I gotta get. As you read my bio, I'm a collector of ribbons. Okay, so you can probably guess my Enneagram, and like strengths class, all that stuff. Like, just go ahead, you can guess it. I'm very self-aware. I am also a partner and super fan to my husband, who is an entertainer, YouTuber, currently in Europe, just doing his thing. And I'm
Nice.
taking care of our babies, which is 2 rescue dogs who
Yeah.
really don't like it when people come to the door. So hopefully you don't hear from them.
No.
And then the latest thing that isn't on my bio, but is definitely who I am, is I built a new organization for consultants and coaches in higher ed, called AHEC. Because a lot of us don't.
No,
We're looking for people.
we love our acronyms
I
in higher.
know it, right? But at least it's kind of
Yeah.
cute.
Let's break it down for the non-higher ed folks who may not know what that acronym stands for. Do you want to say that?
AHEC is the Association for Higher Education Consulting and Coaches.
Yeah.
So it's like you can join an association for everything under the sun. Those
Yeah.
of us that do this work behind the scenes, we have a playhouse. We can hang out, upskill ourselves, find community and connection, and even referral work.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm an instigator. Like I hopefully cause good trouble here and there where I see a problem, an opportunity. I jump in.
Yeah.
And
And I
I
love
also read just like about dragons and like Viking dreamy warriors and just the silliest books.
yeah, I love
Is who I am too. So
yeah, I'm
it's all
also
the thing.
I
Yeah.
love to read, and so I will I'm a huge fan of reading, and so but my bookshelf is actually across from my desk because I think I'd be too anal about the way the books are lined up, and it has to be a certain way, and I don't have time for that.
Okay.
Um, but I also love to
But
read. I also love that. Is that a pillow behind you? The rainbow pillow? My
yes.
could ignore the name
Yeah,
button.
there's a rainbow theme. The book
Yes,
this is color coded. I just,
yes,
bring me light, bring me
love
some
it.
love. Yeah.
So as you may know, this podcast is all about stories of resistance and resilience, whatever that means for you. And one of the questions I ask every guest is, what is your personal concept of resistance and resilience? Given what's going on, and even beyond this, I think we need more stories that can become blueprints for people and how to survive difficult times. And so I'm just curious, what is your personal concept of resistance and resilience?
Well, again, the tissue boxes. I'm not a performer, I swear. Um, I will admit, when I got these questions, I was like, well, this is, I really appreciate it because it gets right to the real. What
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time with in podcasts or even like, especially with campuses, how they're communicating,
Mhm.
it's kind of like not acknowledging the elephant in the room, even if it's something really simple, like this is really hard right now, or like whatever it is, we're just like always moving on and polishing it up and making it look pretty.
Yeah.
And I do not, life is not pretty. It has been a model of mine, especially like on social, that I would share. I think I shared earlier, like, I'm an open book. You're going to kind of see it all. And like the, the grace and the grit
Mm,
between, because I know, especially those that are looking to be a coach or consultant or like break out of like a 9 to 5, it looks really exciting and pretty. Some people like call it sexy. I was like, no, it's
no,
not. It's
no.
real dirty. um,
Nothing about it is sexy, in my opinion.
yeah, no. Working from home, I think people realize through the like pandemic that they're like, oh yeah, just because you're but I've realized, especially showing up in my whole personhood, being an entrepreneur was an identity that was honestly a little painful to embrace. That
Mm,
moving from a campus role identity, while it was also painful in ways of the politics and the positioning that got in the way of what we were actually here to do the work. I had to do a lot of work on myself once I broke off and figured out, like, literally like the Barbie movie, what was I made for?
mm,
And it's interesting, the collection of resistance and resilience, because that is almost where, it's like challenge and supportive students. They need both, and you
mhm.
need both to actually break through for growth. But it's so gross. I will resist the growth. And so right now in my business, like there's a financial element that I've resisted for a really long time, that I know now, in the really messiness, that is where like your resilience stripes really are
Yeah.
um being engraved. And I come from a family of farmers and ranchers and coal miners and teachers and very blue collar, that you just do the work, you keep doing the work until you can't do the work, and then you die.
Yeah.
um and I have burned myself out um too many times to count, that I now feel really called to protect other people, to
Oh,
because people will just they'll eat
Yeah.
you up.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, oh. Sorry, I'm a crybaby, so it's not uncommon for me to cry.
Oh,
It's just uncommon to cry this quick.
oh, take it.
Somewhere. You would think by now I would know to have them nearby, but of course I don't. It's okay. I'm sorry.
No, I don't ever apologize for expressing emotion. I think in this world of AI, we need more humanity than ever.
Yeah.
I think people feel more alone than ever. And again, when
Which
you
is
kind of,
similar, right, to like the work that you and I do around digital connectivity and community,
yeah,
and that these tools that were meant to foster connectivity in some ways gave us a different layer of disconnectivity, like of not being connected with each other. I think there's like these parasocial relationships that tend to happen, and you think you know someone,
right. Unless you are the instigator
right?
of sending a DM or putting out content that has more layers to it, like this podcast. I'm sure there's other topics and people you could have on that would get the views and the clicks, but it wouldn't like feel good or it wouldn't
Right.
fill you up.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm really sitting back with this resilience piece. You what I hate is that you don't get the like score, like you made it, you get to add that to your wall. You are now resilient because life really be lifing.
yeah,
And I mean, the last 2 years, my home was broken into while I was alone and assaulted, and had to crawl to my neighbor's like house next door. That then resulted in a string of issues between rebuilding myself and my family and physically moving.
yeah,
And going back to like, it makes you really think about what are my own Maslow's, and safety,
yeah. Basic
um,
needs,
and
hierarchy
to
of needs.
acknowledge that like if some of those pieces are missing for you right now because of what's happening in the world, it's not to diminish those, that it is not selfish for you to take care of yourself,
Yeah,
or to admit it, you need help and bring people closer. And that's again why like having relationships is so extremely critical, because you'll turn a corner in life and
yeah,
it's gonna hand you something, maybe something that you knew, it was a parent that was aging or a transition that was coming. Resilience work is not meant to be alone,
yeah,
and
yeah. And
that's
I
a
think, yeah, I was gonna say one of the things and first of all, thank you for sharing about your situation from a couple years ago and how you navigated that. I remember reading that on LinkedIn. And I remember it kind of knocked the wind out of me. And I was like, whoa, she's being raw and authentic and sharing something so vulnerable on a platform that is deemed to be this thing. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope this helps other people, especially women and femmes and, minority folks, be able to look at that kind of platform. Because you have quite a bit of following on there, right? Like you're one of the top voices for a reason. And the leadership you demonstrated in that hard moment, the vulnerability, the storytelling, I know whether they ever tell you or not, I know that it helps someone out there. And that's the whole purpose of why I do the work that I do, right? How to harness the power of stories to create a more inclusive world. Because I know culturally, right? I think of all the things that white supremacy took from us. It was our communal way of living that we need to fight to get back. Because as a Latino, right, there is nothing in my family that we ever did alone. This
Yeah.
individualism is not, it's a Western concept. It's not a concept that's innate to, at least not my Caribbean, Puerto Rican roots, right? And so understanding what it means to be together, to be in community, especially at a time when it's so fractured, our nation, us versus
Yeah.
them, and who's a citizen and who's not, and all these things. And at the end of the day, it's like it's really hard to hate someone when you see yourself reflected in the story, in their story. And
Mm.
that's why I try to use the power of stories to create windows and mirrors. Windows,
Yeah.
an insight that you don't understand, and a mirror so you can see yourself reflected back at you in some way. And it's amazing to me. I mean, I'm not a social scientist anymore, but if I was still doing that work, right? If I was looking at all the ways that telling my story and being a storyteller has helped me connect with people across difference, I would have a lot more examples to share that would surprise people, right? There are people in my life, like my colleague at John Jay, Sarah. Her dad is an 89-year-old Jamaican man who was in New York City visiting her, and he saw my book on her bookshelf, and he just randomly grabbed it. Now, if you know me, you know that he's not my target audience. An 89-year-old Christian, straight, black man is not from Jamaica, is not my target audience. And he said to his daughter, he read it in like a day, and he said, "You have to read this book. It is one of the most moving books I've read." And he wasn't my target demo, right? And it just shows the power of stories to humanize each other. And I think that, I think to your point around burnout, like I just got back from Louisiana. I had scheduled for my best friend's 40th birthday a trip to New Orleans a year prior. I said to her, no matter where we are in the world, we will meet up in New Orleans for your 40th birthday. That's her happy place. And I didn't realize then, a year ago, that I was scheduling that break for myself at a time when I would need it the most.
Mm.
Because I thought I was on the verge of a mental breakdown. That's how
Yeah.
stressful the last few weeks have been.
Mm.
And the way people glamorize entrepreneurship, it's like it's a lot of grit and a lot of stuff behind the scenes that isn't a polished podcast appearance, right? That there's so much going on. And so I really appreciate you naming those things.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
planning a vacation a year in advance to New Orleans does sound like the start of a rom-com too. So just think about those ingredients a little bit. Just an idea.
You tell me, I schedule my stuff out like a year in advance. It's
That's
pretty.
amazing. And that's what you have to do though, is you have to put it in writing and protect it.
Yeah.
I worked with a business coach years ago. And she's like, you need to take a weekend off. You need to take, she was telling me to take more time off. And she's like, okay, let's start with this 1 weekend off a month. I don't know. But basically, I negotiated her down to a half day off a month. I was working every single day. It was around the time the book was in its final legs. That was just how in my mind I work and then work will come to me. And then
Yeah.
I was actually resisting
Mm.
flow of abundance. I was
Mm.
living in bank account aside, like really restriction. I thought I could, if I control my time, I can control the outcome. The universe works different than that. And I appreciate you sharing about. So I waited 6 months to talk about the break-in. I just knew I needed to do my own work, and I knew it could be triggering for people. I knew it would be triggering for me. I was really prescriptive of who I pulled in really close after it happened. And at that point, I really did want to, I don't want anybody to experience something like that. But what I have found is we have all gone through some shit that you can't or won't or would never want to post on LinkedIn, or maybe even your family doesn't know. And it is just here all the time, or it is it's what keeps our therapists in business. And I just don't want people to feel alone in it. And there's a lot of performance that happens on social.
Yeah.
And you can feel like, God, I am just never it just looks so perfect, and you don't realize, like, oh no, actually behind the screen they're going through all this stuff.
Yeah.
And not full judgment on them for not giving us the other side, but I have found so much connection and even closure on my end when I've shared my process and
Yeah.
not just the perfection. Um, and so I appreciate you, like where you sat with that in a way, because that's the bigger why for me.
Yeah. I think you've been doing that. I mean, that is probably the most personal way you've done it in terms of your career, but you have been working at the intersection of leadership and digital life since before most institutions sent their first tweets back when Twitter was the thing. Um, what were you seeing back then that others weren't, and what drew you to this space so early on?
Yeah, so my joke was I fell in love with college so hard I never left. I was I was this co-ed on a table at a college party yelling out I love college. Like the social life and the academic and everything. I
Yeah.
still don't do that. My knees will not bear it. Um And I found out there was a field of student affairs, and it wasn't even just the student work I fell in love with. It was the environment, it was the transformation, and it was almost like my grandpa Clark, my whole life was like, who didn't go beyond seventh grade. He's like, I just want to see you go to college. Like he just wanted that for me and opportunities that, just wouldn't be available to him. And I slowly social media like apps started to come into our worlds as I went into grad school. Thank the bejesus, MySpace didn't show up until I was out of undergrad. And I was just so inquisitive, not only in like customizing what song was going to play when you got onto my profile or the sparkles. But then more apps showed up, Facebook, and I would have conversations with my students about it. Or they were telling me, hey, Josie, now do you know about the Facebook? I'm like, no, let's go. And so by the time I was a full-time professional, I just had this ability to explore with those early adopters too, which were students. And so by the time I got into programming, where you're just spinning your wheels trying to get students to come to stuff, I was
Yeah.
like, well, why aren't we? They're on Facebook. We should be totally on Facebook with them. But notes to me at the time, there was a policy that I won't list the institution, but we were not allowed to have Facebook accounts. This was also when you'd have to create a person and not a page.
Yeah.
And I did it anyway.
Yes. Rebel.
And I gave it to my students to help run. And so they would invite all their friends. And so all of a sudden, this Facebook account got huge, and I got called to the principal's office. Soon after that, we could make officially like Facebook pages that were business pages. And then, of course, that grew to Instagram. But like no one else on that campus was even like, they were scared of it. They were like, no, this is bad. I'm not saying Meta is not bad.
Yeah.
But Meta is going to keep being Meta, and we're trying to make things really meaningful in our work. And it is a tool to connect to our community.
It's where the students are, right? I think higher education often talks about this philosophy around meeting students where they are, but there was so much resistance to that when it came to the digital space. And I said to myself, do you want to meet the students where they are or not? Right?
Yeah, well, because it's going to mean you're uncomfortable. You want to meet them at 2:00 in the conference room that you offered some free pizza because you blocked your calendar off then.
Can you believe that?
They still do it. The other thing that I saw was on Twitter, rest in pieces, is there were some leaders who were doing really interesting things. We had deans that were interacting with their students, and students were replying and were really into it. And then a student would see them on campus, and because they posted about that they had to bring their dog to the vet, the student came up to them without knowing them yet and saying, "How's your dog?"
Oh,
Like, that's like, my aim is to make leaders both online and in person less intimidating,
yeah,
because they forget, or sometimes they double down on their positionality and power,
yeah,
and who we are serving, our students,
yeah,
our staff, um, is a huge element of this work, is human work. We're not just putting out widgets out there,
right,
people. Like,
right,
we are a business. We got to call ourselves that.
yeah, yeah,
So when a leader works with me, they understand, like, I'm going to pressure you in a good way to communicate. But it's not just one way, and it's also going to get you out of your office a whole lot more.
yeah. And it's funny because when I was at John Jay, I was at junior level, entry level position as a comms person. And I had a lot of access to the vice president of student affairs at the time with Lynette Cook Francis, who has now become a dear friend and still one of my mentors to this day. And I haven't worked at John Jay since 2019. And I remember having difficult conversation with her and saying, you need to be human online. People need to know that there's a human behind this vice president title in the office, right? And that there is a person who's trying to serve the students and do the best she can. And I remember sitting in her office and having to. I remember back in the day when SA Chat #SA Chat was a thing on Twitter, and I would be with her
RIP.
in real time, RIP, right? Like with her in real time, like responding and writing for her, and she was
Oh, wow.
so into it, like she was so like she understood, right? And I think that, and it's funny because I remember, you know, and that's why I had to leave higher ed because I loved it so much. I thought it would be like a Francisco Diaz. If you're part of the NASPA community, you might be familiar with Francisco Diaz. He is one of my
Yeah.
he was my associate vice president of student development at William Patterson, which is where I graduated from. And to this day, he's my chosen Theo, right? He's my Theo for life. And I remember wanting to be wanting to be a Francisco Diaz for somebody else. And
Mm.
I remember I had to grieve who I thought I was going to be for who I needed to be. Because higher ed as a structure never wanted all of me. They just wanted parts of me. And I knew that I was meant for something that was going to be different. Something that was going to allow me to be wholly myself and
Well,
not
and bigger.
and bigger. Yes.
You can have a bigger impact.
Yeah, and that's why although I don't work in higher ed anymore, I still go back to speak at universities and colleges often. I consulted recently with AMDA around disability inclusion for their teachers, staff, right? So I do a lot of different things. I mentor college students. I'm very much still active in that space, but not in the way that I thought I would.
But there is grieving and reformulation of your sense of self,
Yeah,
that will happen as you transition,
yeah,
and fully embody
yeah,
yourself. And I think role models and mentors are amazing, but and even we know in student development there's these periods of time, and adult development is the same. Like, I don't know, they keep telling me I'm gonna have a midlife crisis or something. I don't know, whatever. But like this, it's like shedding skins. Like, some of this is you're right on time. You're right on par. It doesn't make it mean it's more challenging to go through.
yeah.
But
So
but
there's also
also some people.
no, I was gonna say, I wonder if you felt this way in higher ed when you were doing your work. I became such known on campus as the communication guy, or the one who can communicate with the students so well that they never wanted me to do or say certain things outside of that realm. And I'm just like, I have so much talent and skill, and you're trying to limit me as this communications guru for the students. I am so much more than that. Yes, that's part of
Mm,
what I can do and part of my skill set. But all this to offer, you're not even tapping into it because you only want to keep me in this box.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's some transactional nature to institutions and organizations that and it's made to hold traditions and, norms. And as much as I do social and marketing, I do so much organizational change.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh my God.
the posting is easy.
Yeah.
What we build strategy, no problem. It
Yeah.
goes a lot and I'm sure in a variety of different work that
Yeah.
you do too, you see that is
Oh yeah. Higher ed
it
moves
goes
the speed
very
of
deep.
slow. I always say higher ed moves at the speed of slow. That it doesn't do anything quickly, which I
Yeah.
also think why the field is where it's at right now, because it's not adapting quick enough. I want to ask you this because we're running out of time. I want to honor your time. Um, there's two questions left, and I'm gonna just go with the one that I feel most resonant. So I'm gonna go with this one. Right now, as you know, we're seeing major corporations and their leaders capitulating to the Trump administration at dizzying speed. And some folks have taken a neutral stance in their communications, if they communicate at all. What advice would you give to leaders across sectors on how to communicate in this moment? Because you work with a lot of administrators and leadership teams across organizations. What advice do you give them?
Well, it's almost like your retirement. If you don't put money in over time, like it compounds, right? And building community and trust works the same way. So when we arise to challenging times for leaders, if they have not done the work behind the scenes and in front of the screen, by the time a crisis hits, whether in the whole country or locally on their campus, um, you've got a longer jump to make. Where I do, this is where the equation also gets tricky. Is my clients can vary greatly based on state. To try to navigate with a VP from Texas is much different than one in California, and then between state and private. And so we also have to I don't want to segment the industry or different industries in general. But when I am much more behind the scenes on things, I start to see what are, especially if you're reliant on state dollars and grants and literally the trickle down effect of who it's actually hurting. I can have more empathy in some cases why statements aren't made, because it actually is to protect
Yeah.
money coming in to keep our students in funded and literally protected. We also came from a point where honestly leaders were putting out too many statements that started to feel like, before we had AI,
Yeah.
like they were just like, oh, this thing happened,
Turning
okay,
turning them out, turning them out.
right. And so then that fell flat.
Yeah.
I think we are now, and I think the closer we get to November and after, I'm starting to see some more leaders in certain circumstances, and I do mean institution types,
Yeah.
bringing back their voice. And I saw this especially with student affairs, where I just saw silence, period, whether if it was just posting on Instagram, like for fun, or LinkedIn for, like celebration or whatever. I think there was a silencing effect that heavily went everywhere. I think where institutions haven't done the hard work is, when is it that we are willing to double down on our values no matter what? And our community, our donors, are going to rally behind us. And
Yeah.
there's examples out there of it. But it's it is an impossible circumstance, because goodness knows the things I want to post every single
Yeah.
day.
That's been the biggest blessing from becoming an expat, is that like a lot of the clients I serve are not in the higher ed space, but I do have like
Yeah.
projects a lot of my clients are in the democracy space. It's like one of my big
Mm,
last year in 2024 was Latinos Represent. And with them being a 501c3 in a democracy space, you could imagine the amount of strategy and conversations I have had with the executive director around what was too much, what was just right, right? And it became
yeah.
this line. And I said to her, I was like, this is a very difficult time to be doing comms work in the democracy space. I was like, I am feeling on edge. I am like doubting everything I know in my bones to be like
Mm,
legally okay because it falls
right.
within the mind because so much of what's happening right now is beyond the pale. Like it's laws are being broken, right? There are norms that are being evaded, and it means that if you just put out one statement, although it falls within the confines of acceptable communications for a 501c3 status, you suddenly put a target on your client's back, and you don't want to do that, right? You don't want to be the reason that your clients have or get into any kind of trouble with the federal government, right? That's like not what they hire us to do for them, right? And so, but it became this really tense moment for me where I said to myself, "Oh my gosh, I can't do this right now." I need to like check out for a second because I began to doubt every single crafted message I was developing for her.
Mm.
Yeah, it was a really interesting.
You are not alone in
Yeah.
that at all. And what I go back to is my clients. I know they're aligned if they are also feeling an incongruence,
Mhm.
and I can hold space for that with them and what we can do behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and honestly just keep hope that
Yeah.
like this isn't status quo, that like
Yeah.
we're keeping receipts.
Yeah.
And I mean, going back to resiliency,
Yeah.
um using our power where we can, but
Yeah.
on the business side of things, I fully feel you there of wanting to care for the humans that you're set to support.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we're not
Yeah.
just feeling the things.
Yeah. And I think, I've been saying this since COVID. I think we've all experienced collective PTSD, and we've all kind of just went back to normal as if we didn't just have
Mm,
deep isolation and mass grief and mass death. And that changes the fabric of a person and let
oh my
alone
God.
collectively, right? And so I think that we've kind of all went back to the office or back to whatever, and we just kind of
Yeah.
back to business as usual. But nothing about this time since the pandemic and now feels like back to usual. This is uncharted waters for me as a person. I mean, I've never been alive at a time like now, and that's why I wanted to create this podcast because I wanted people to know that they were in this alone, to know that
Yeah.
other ways of being resilient and to resist, and that there's no shame in being human at a time when so much is shifting around us. How do we stay grounded? How do we stay steady? And
There is a trend on TikTok for
okay,
a topic that the girlies are doing about leaning into dissociation.
mm.
And I do think it's like a Gen Z, and it's like in
Oh, that sounds
jest.
very Gen Z. Yes.
It's in jest, but like of
Yeah.
the horrors, what else are we meant to do?
Yeah.
But I'm also speaking from someone who has actively had to work on my disassociation. Do not equate it with resistance or
Yeah.
resilience of just existing. It
Yeah.
is to work through it is extremely uncomfortable. You have to do really hard work in the
Yeah.
moment too, not just like, I'm going to meditate and journal. It's so
Yeah.
cute. I'm going to
Yeah.
pull a tarot card. It's
Yeah.
messy stuff.
Yeah.
And so
It needs to be.
you got to keep doing this for the messy stories, for the meaning, for our Gen Zers. We don't want them dissociated. We want them fully connected,
Yeah.
holistic in both the hope and the harms that are happening.
And
We really
last
don't.
comment, I asked you to finish this sentence, answer this question in one sentence. I know it could be hard for us. Imagine it's one tweet. Um, before the character extension, back when it was 140 characters. What do you hope to shift in society through your work?
My why is for people to use their voice.
Hmm. Yeah. I love.
They'll just use the tools available to do that.
Yes. And talking about all the tools, I'm going to link her website, her book, her LinkedIn, her socials. If you're not familiar with Dr. Josie's work, please, you don't have to be a higher ed professional to learn and appreciate her work. It is communication skills are a universal thing, and she is just one of the best, if not the best, in my opinion, of people who are early a convert of using social media, but also I think early on in organizing us as a subfield within higher ed, student affairs, especially about how to do it effectively. And I have seen how working with students on social media has helped them tremendously, both professionally and personally. And to this day, I connect with my students at John Jay. You know, I only worked at John Jay and William Patterson before leaving higher ed, and to this day, I still have a relationship with these students. And it is one of the biggest joys of my life knowing that like I played a small role in someone's life, and they went on to be, you know, a social media manager for higher ed, or they went on to do this or that because they met me and they saw how I was living my life and how I showed up. And you know, we cannot become the things we can't consume in the stories we hear and read and watch and listen to. So thank you so much for your time, Dr.
Thank you for having me.
Here. Y'all be sure to check out this episode and other episodes this season. This season has been fuego, okay? It has been filled with some of the best, and I'm so fortunate that these folks say yes to me. This is a labor of love, as we said earlier. So be sure to like, rate, and subscribe this podcast and share it with the people in your life. You know, I always say we often wait till the person's gone to give them their flowers, but we don't have to do that. We're very much still alive. So be sure to give us your flowers by sharing our work. It costs you nothing to share this podcast episode with a communications professional in your life or hire a leader, etc. And be sure to remember that you're not alone, that we're in this together. We were never meant to do this alone, and that what connects us is far greater than what divides us. Until next time, be well.